What's going on, guys? Jeff with the Motor Mindset channel here. Today we're going to be working on an early 90s Briggs & Stratton powered pressure washer, manufactured by Parker Cleaning Products in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Looked at the date code earlier, I believe. Let's take another quick look here. So each Briggs & Stratton made after 1965 will have 3 series of numbers. It'll have your model, your type, and your code. The first 2 digits of your code is going to be the year it was manufactured. So that is a 9 and a 0, which means this engine was made in 1990, which would put this pump probably somewhere in the 91, 92, 93 range. This came from a friend of mine, also a subscriber. Shout out to Sean and Time for Fitness. He pulled this out of a dumpster, I guess. I don't think it works, but unfortunately we won't be able to find out because it is cold out and the hose is frozen. So even if we do get it running, I'm not going to be able to test the operation of it. Maybe we can do that in a later video. But the goal for now is to just get it up and running. If I do get it running, I'm not going to run it too long because it's not good to run a pump like that with no water in it, because water is also kind of lubricates everything inside. It's not good to run them dry. So how about we get it up on the bench and do our initial checks? This is a Briggs & Stratton I/C, which, as you can read, stands for Industrial and Commercial. So this is kind of their beefier engine of the time. Has a cast iron cylinder liner, just a little heavier built than like your standard consumer stuff. So first thing we're going to check is see if it turns over. I was told it does. I might end up pulling this handle off. This is just kind of getting in the way. But let's see if it'll pull over, see if I can do that one-handed. Yep, that feels good. Rolls all the way through. It feels like it's got some compression. The recoil feels good. It's not jamming. It's retracting like it should. We've got our controls here. We've got choke and throttle. I believe our kill switch is at the end of our throttle, so there's not a separate switch. So that moves. A little stiff, but that's all right. Choke moves. Let's see what else. How about we pull our spark plug out, drop a little bit of oil down in there. Sometimes they're loose. Let's see. Just happen to have our plug wrench right there on the bench. Spark plug looks good. Focus, focus. You'll have to take my word for it. Plug looks good. This is a flathead engine, meaning the valves come up on the side of the cylinder and the heads are right next to each other. Overhead valve, obviously the valves would be in the head and they would open downward into the combustion chamber, whereas a flathead, they open up into the combustion chamber. It's not as efficient. You can't run as high of compression. Just the airflow isn't efficient. Essentially, an engine is a big air pump. The more efficiently you can get air in and out of the engine, the more power you're going to make. And with this design, obviously, we have the intake valve on this side, the exhaust valve on this side. Downstroke of the engine is the intake stroke, draws our fuel in from the carburetor, goes up into that valve, and then has to go over into the combustion chamber, which is over on this side of the head. The piston comes up, squeezes that. Then you get your power stroke, which is the downstroke. Piston goes down, comes back up, and then it has to exit the exhaust valve on this side. So it's just, you got your intake mixture coming up and then going over and then coming down, and it's a really inefficient path for that airflow. So that doesn't really have a lot to do with if this engine will run or not. Flatheads were used for a lot of years. I don't think anybody currently makes a flathead small engine. I think everybody's gone to overhead valve or overhead cam. But for a lot of years, this is what Briggs & Stratton was doing up until probably the mid to late 90s is when they got away from that design. But I'm going to find some oil, see if I can get down in there, see if we can get it on top of our piston over on this side, just to lubricate that bore a little bit. See if we can get it shot in there. Probably not an absolutely necessary step, but it's never going to hurt. Worst case scenario, it smokes a little bit when it fires up, but I'd rather have that lubrication in there and deal with a little bit of smoke initially than have nothing on those cylinders and have those rings rubbing against a dry ore, which isn't going to do anything any good. I'm going to go ahead and pull this handle off. One bolt is already missing out of it, so it should just be that little 7/16 right there. So I am going to probably do that off camera. That's nothing too exciting. I will bring you back, probably have you in the tripod, and then we can start checking for spark. Okay, now we are ready to test it for spark. Like I said earlier, I think our kill switch is probably at the very end of the throttle. So I'm going to throttle it up a little bit. And we will give it a yank here and see if we've got spark. We do! We do. I believe this is solid state ignition, meaning the coil and everything is contained. It doesn't have ignition points in a condenser like the older style engines do. I believe they got away from points in 84, 85, 86, somewhere in that range, and this is a 1990 engine. So if we didn't have spark and we dug into it and disconnected all of our kill switch, still didn't have spark, then we would have to replace the coil, because there's no serviceable parts inside that coil. You just get a new one. They're not that expensive, and then you're back on the road. So we've got spark. Let's take a look in our fuel tank, see what that looks like. I don't know the last time this engine ran. Okay, we've got a baffle in there. That's to keep fuel from sloshing around. Like race cars with fuel cells also have a big chunk of foam in there too. I don't know why something like this would have that necessarily, but that's what that is. Can we tip it and maybe see if there's any fuel in there? Kind of tough to do. I'm trying to film and tip it here. I don't see anything splashing up. I don't see anything in there. So that's probably a good sign. Let's give it the sniff test here. It smells like old fuel. It doesn't smell terrible. So that's probably a good sign, I would think. Get a fuel cap put back on here. That's your oil level, or oil fill right there. You've got one on either side. This one is kind of blocked with our fittings for our hose and everything, which actually hooks up right underneath here, which I think is just a terrible spot, because the fitting on the hose is pretty long in itself. I don't know how anybody would be able to hook that up, or maybe it's supposed to be turned 90 degrees and somebody just turned it down for some reason. This engine also has a low oil sensor, which I'm assuming is tied into, well, maybe it's just a light. It says oil guard on it. I would think if it was a low oil sensor, it would cut spark. But there's also just a light up there, so maybe that light comes on if there's no oil. Not sure exactly how that's set up. But since I pulled that handle off, the whole thing's sitting kind of crooked. I'm going to try to find a block of wood so I can block it up level. Then we can crack our oil filler open there, see if we've got any oil in it. That's better. So these just unthread, nothing fancy there. Kind of a tight spot on this. Hopefully we've got something in there. Tough to see. Let's see if we can tip it our way a little bit. We've got oil. I don't know if you can see that creeping up to the edge of the threads. We've got oil and it's full. It looks dark, but it's there, so that'll be good enough to see if it'll run. Can we do this left-handed? The weird angle. There we go. Kind of nasty. This cap was pretty loose when I just cracked it open there, but well, how about we dump some fuel down the plug hole here and see if we can get it to pop. There we go. This is premix fuel just because I have a lot of two-stroke engines. Just looking at this handle, that weld is cracked. I have a lot of two-stroke engines, snowmobiles, and everything around, I should say. Not going to hurt it. If anything, it'll give a little more lubrication. It's just going to smoke a little bit, not a big deal. That might have been too much. And we will likely shake this light down in the process, since it's just kind of propped up and I have yet to mount it to anything. I'm still trying to think of a good solution for that right now. It's just propped up on a block of wood. There we go. That was tough to say. And the other end is sitting on my drill press over there. I don't really like how that plug wire snaps on. I might see if I can... It's just kind of a loop of steel that sits around the terminal on the plug. So I'm just going to try to crimp that down a little bit with my needle nose here. Make it click a little tighter. There we go. So we're going to set our throttle at idle. And hopefully we get a pop. That was a pop. Okay. Well, I think this is going to be an easy one. If we're lucky, we won't even have to pull that carb apart. So I am going to maybe dump a little fuel in it. I'm going to bring it down, set it on the floor, because I don't want to shake everything off the bench like I usually do, especially if I clamp it down. Plus, it's somewhat portable here. So I'm going to grab it, set it on the floor, get you reset up, and we'll give it some fuel, see if we can run it. Okay, we're going to dump some fuel in it here. And hopefully, if our carb is working properly, it'll draw that up. And we can hear the engine run a little bit. I don't want to run it too long, just because we're inside. And this is also premixed fuel. Let's do a little more. This is premixed fuel, so if I run it long enough, it will get a little hazy in here with that smoke. But on the flip side, it'll smell nice. So, I believe Sean said when he picked this up, it had a sign on it that said not working. So I would assume that our pump is bad, so I'm not going to feel too bad running it with no water supply hooked up to it. Plus, like I said earlier, the hose is frozen. It's about 15 degrees outside, so I don't want to try to put any water in it anyway. So let's give it a couple pulls here, see if it'll take off. We might have to prime it again. Well, that's a good sign. Might just need to run with the choke on a little bit longer here. Let's try it again. Short video this week, I guess. I just noticed it's got an oil filler right there with a dipstick. I'm sitting there messing around. Short video this week. Carburetor seems like it's totally dialed in. Pull you out of the tripod here. So yeah, they said not working. I would guess the pump is probably bad. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to test it. Good sounding engine. It was misfiring a little bit there at the beginning, but once it warmed up a little bit, it seemed to smooth out. It sits at idles. It does seem to shake a little bit, but that could just be the characteristic of this engine. I don't know what it is for horsepower. It says right there. I was going to say it's probably 5, and it is. Quiet power. Look at that. It is a pretty quiet engine, I'll give it that. It's not Honda quiet, but it's all right. Something like this is not going to be worth trying to rebuild the pump or put a new pump on it, anything like that. And unfortunately, a lot of times with pressure washer engines, the output shaft it's either going to be splined or it's going to be some kind of specialty thing where you're not going to be able to put like a clutch on it for a go-kart or something like that. So this engine really doesn't have a lot of value unless somebody has a pressure washer with a blown-up engine or somebody has too much time on their hands, like that happens. Well, I wish I had more for you, but this is kind of going to be it. It's going to be a short video, which isn't always the worst thing. So if you did enjoy the video, please let me know in the comments. If you have not already, please subscribe. Like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you need to get a hold of me, the email is motormindset1@gmail.com. As always, thanks for watching.